Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to move to Jenny, who's right next to me. Because the stories may not be exactly alike, but they're both about a place, right? And about a universe of various characters, correct? And you have the sense of a mosaic of pieces that are going to come together, but it's really about in sort of an idealized place, and it's not ideal, but it's I had the sense it was a bit of a fabrication, which is what fiction does. Why did you, I mean, again, it's the same sense, because I always see the ghost of something terrible, but it's always on the fringes, and then the story develops. I mean, how essential, how undeniable is the experience of the 20th century, of what happened in Germany?
Maybe my story is a good example for just this question, because it's the place I described in my book is a house in a countryside close to Berlin at a beautiful lake. So it's an ideal place, as you said. And what me interested was how the big history also came to this place, which was meant to be a place of escape and relax from the big world of politics and of work and arts or whatever. And step by step, the reader gets the feeling that there is no escape. Even in this ideal place, you can find traces of the big history and of the big changes, of the changes of governments, of systems, of political thinking. And if you take it as a more basic question, of course, everybody is longing for an ideal place for his life, and everybody has to leave it one day, later or sooner. So the story is a basic one.
It's basic. In fact, it's more than just basic, because it's fabulistic, it's mythical. And I always had a sense as I was reading that you were sort of going in, I mean, even the way the book starts with what is it that one should be superstitious about? Okay, one should watch for things, and how, I forget, the carpenter, and then there's a priest, and then it's sort of a whole litany of characters. But they are characters, but they're also, they're not stock characters, but they are stand-ins for a larger sense of resonance, this historical resonance that permeates their lives. It's not just the events of, let me reformulate the situation as I see it. It's not just about very specific events, though it is about specific events. It's about these specific events having been transmogrified into something larger and bigger, and therefore more scary, and they won't go away.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm not asking you a question, I'm just commenting.
So, you found a priest in my book?
No, but wasn't there a marriage ceremony?
I think,
yes.
there was a marriage ceremony. Yeah. This is right. Now, just what I did was to look at all the stories I tell in my book from the perspective of the Ice Age. And so, for me, it's not only a dark side. If you look at all those stories which happened in the 20th century from a point which is pretty far away. Ice Age was some 1,000 years ago. But what I see as a kind of relief also is that you see all these motions which people lived through in the 20th century. You also find in this very slow motion of nature and of the moving of the ice and the coming of the lake and the going away of the lake, which is to be expected in in the future one day. And so you find all those tragedies and or things which are a tragedy to human beings. You find the same things in other structures, and so it could be a kind of consolation too. It's not only that you find the dark things in every life, but you find the same moving, and this is not so bad.
Well, it's strange because we're all looking for resolution whenever there's a huge event that totally undefines us. We can find even resolution in a sense in an acceptance of paradox, as Radka said. But then you also find a resolution or a sense of acceptance and resignation, maybe even a form of serenity, in the sense that this is how events go, these are the patterns that permeate our lives. And in recognition of patterns, we have a sense of, is that what you're saying? That the pattern itself is a form of...
Probably it's an illusion to find any pattern. But of course, if you're a writer, you try to look as long on reality until you find any kind of pattern, and you try to fix it in a way. So maybe this is what one tries again and again, because once you have found the patterns, you lose them again, and by looking more carefully on the same things.
Okay, no, that's very good, because the other issue that as I was reading, I was thinking of I was thinking of 100 Years of Solitude, which is not about World War II, and it's not about Germany, none of that. But again, you have a sense of repetition and a kind of cadence to the events that history gives us. And I have a sense that you find, you said consolation, in the recognition that however crazy, the recurrence of events might in fact bring us a sense of security. Does it?
Yeah, you could see it like this. And my experience is that the longer you look at such stories, one day you find one pattern, and the next day, for instance, you look more in another corner of it. So you see all things are connected to each other. So maybe one day I would look at the same story in a completely different way. So it's okay.
No, because
it's too complicated to explain.
No, but it's so important, because essentially you have the 20th century. How many of you have heard of the word fragmentation? It's used all the time, ad nauseum, because we are fragmented. Our history is fragmented. Everything is fragmented, and authors are always put in the position of having to duplicate the fragmentation, because that's what people expect. But at the same time, an author cannot do that, correct? I mean, the temptation of an author, as you said.
I must say that the question of fragmentation is very fashionable, but I can follow it, because when I look back in former times, people had to wander around Europe or wherever, they had to find new places. Or I visited Ellis Island, so you can see so many broken biographies in the last century as much as you find them in this century or in the last century before the last century. So I think the fragmentation is not a very new invention, and I think one of the main points in my book is the question of being home. And if you look at all these moving around, you will see very soon that everybody has a new home and find a new place to call home. And his parents might have come from somewhere else and had the same story but somewhere else. So it's I think the fragmentation doesn't interest me so much, because it's a
tiresome trope, isn't it? It is tiresome. I mean, I hear it all the time. People write dissertations on fragmentation, please. But I think the other concept that we're all skirting around is the idea of, to quote another cliche, the transcendental homelessness. of the 20th century, which is, however it's cliché, it's still there. Everybody is homeless. You build a home, you hope to ground something, and then the ground shakes from under you and you lose it again. And I think that that's the only response is not just tragedy, it's this is unfair, where is justice? And that's a bigger concept that I cannot even address, I don't even understand it. But I'm moving on to the next person, Olga. Where is Olga? There she is. Because your book is exactly the same thing. You start with a place that has a name. Tell us about the name, because in English...
Po polsku to się nazywa prawiek.
In Polish it's called prawie, primeval.
Prawiek to nie jest słowo używane na co dzień, to jest słowo trochę też mityczne.
It's not a word that's used every day, but a word that's somewhat mythical itself.
Znalazłam je gdzieś w starej polszczyźnie i tak nazwałam tę miejscowość i słowo to określa zarazem miejsce, jak i czas.
She looked in, I'll speak in the first person, I looked in Old Polish language and found a word that referred both to place and time.
Okay, but again, you have the same situation. You have it's a cobbled story. How do you say cobbled? It's made up of really sort of repeated fragments. Okay, the story according to such and such, a story about such and such, the story of the mother and father, and then suddenly, as the pieces sort of, they are like blocks of ice that sort of are working together towards some kind of pattern, and then you drop a hint, and I knew right away what it was. You mentioned 1936, right? And then, I mean, anybody, even a bad reader like me, knows that if you mention 1936, it's not about Spain, it's about something else, something to come. And then you mention 1939, and then I know where this is going, okay? So you are, again, there's a certain, let me ask you the question. Is there a certain tentativeness about addressing the big issue of World War II? It's sort of delicacy that you're trying to get there, but you're trying to avoid it?
Wczoraj, kiedy mieliśmy to swoje czytanie w księgarni,
Yesterday when we had our readings in the bookstore,
też zdałam sobie sprawę i uświadomiłam z tego, że właściwie książki, przyjechaliśmy tutaj do Stanów i nasze książki w większości odnoszą się cały czas do przeszłości, do tej najbardziej straumatyzowanej przeszłości.
We were sort of discussing all these books and bringing them here, and we were dealing with the fact that they were all dealing with the past and the trauma of the past.
Tak sobie pomyślałam, czy jak przyjechaliśmy do Stanów i wreszcie ci właśnie Amerykanie zapytają, czy ta literatura europejska cały czas się kręci wokół II wojny światowej, wokół zagłady, wokół tych starych tematów, czy oni nie mają tam współczesności w tej Europie?
It almost gives the impression that in America that Europeans are always sort of turning over this these questions of famine, of the Holocaust and so forth, and that there's as if there were no present.
Ale pomyślałam sobie, że i tutaj Radka i Jenny dokładnie też potwierdzają tą moją intuicję, że jednak w pewien charakterystyczny sposób rozumiemy jakby zadanie literatury, czy też rolę historii w literaturze.
After this, that Jenny and Radka confirmed my intuition
że literatura i historia są nierozłączne.
That literature and history are inseparable.
I że właściwie dla mnie, nie wiem czy dla moich przedmówczyń też, ale że historia nie jest niczym, co się już zdarzyło raz naprawdę i koniec, tylko czymś, co się nieustannie dzieje.
That history isn't something that just happens and then comes to an end, but that is always in a state of development, of evolution.
Historia mianowicie się dzieje wtedy, kiedy ją opowiadamy. I właściwie
that history is always something to which we are responding.
Nie, opowiadamy ją sobie, ten jest.
That
aha, okej.
Sorry.
Nie, że historia dzieje się wtedy tylko, kiedy jest opowiadana.
The history is always answering something.
Mhm.
Okay.